Hey guys, welcome to Transformation Tuesday. How are you? While I'm waiting for a few of you to jump on, I'm going to introduce tonight's topic, which is how do we accelerate our growth and our learning? How do we become learning machines? How do we grow even faster? How do we accelerate the evolution of our consciousness? And this is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. I'm going to share with you tonight. How do we accelerate our consciousness? Hello, Dora. How are you? Good to see you here. So how do we accelerate our consciousness? How do we accelerate the evolution of our being, who we are being, what we're able to achieve? And I don't know about you guys, but one of my biggest passions, my hobbies, my obsessions in life is extracting the most out of life. So this topic here directly relates to, well, how do we get more out of life? How do we earn more money? How do we increase the quality of our relationships? Hey Matt, good to see you here. How do we get better results in our career or our business? This is the foundation, because what got us here is not going to get us to the next level. So if we don't continue to grow, to expand, to push beyond our comfort zone, we're not going to create the results that we want across all different dimensions of our life. So one of my favorite quotes is, we're either green and growing or ripe and rotting. So are you green and growing, or are you ripe and rotting? It's one of the universal laws of nature. You're either growing or you're dying. And I think this is a great question to ask ourselves and check in. Well, how much am I growing? How green am I? How much am I expanding? How much am I staying in my comfort zone? And because I think you'll agree that while the comfort zone is comfortable, after you stay there for too long, there's no growth, there's no expansion, and it becomes the pain zone. And I've experienced this many, many times in my life, and that pain zone certainly isn't comfortable. So we need to recognize and acknowledge, well, maybe we need to choose to grow before that pain comes along. Hey, Daddy, good to see you here, my brother. Hope you're well. So let's dive in, guys. I want to share with you guys the most powerful principles that I believe accelerate our growth and our learning. And when we master these principles, I believe we can learn a hell of a lot quicker. So the first aspect is, we've first of all got to care so much about our own expansion and our personal growth that if we, thank you, I can do it. This has been my mantra for the last couple of days, my intention. We've got to care so much about life. We've got to care so much about growing and expanding that it becomes one of our highest priorities in life. Because if our approach to learning and growth is ad hoc, if it's, well, I'll do it if I get time, then what's going to happen is we're not going to create the results that we want in our life. We're not going to be able to actualize our purpose. We're not going to be able to live our purpose. We're not going to be able to be the best version of ourselves. So we need to prioritize learning and growth and expansion. We need to put it right up there. And for you guys I just want to share this with you guys about me. My biggest, one of my top values in life is growth. I would say growth and expansion in terms of learning, it'd be up there in my top 3 values. So my first one would be love and connection, then would be vitality, and then third would be growth. They're my top 3 values in life. So the conversation I'm having with you tonight is, it's really, really important to me, and I wouldn't be creating the results in my life, and I wouldn't have done what I've done in my business if I didn't value growth and learning and expansion. So I wanted to reiterate to begin with that we need to when I say value, we need to place a large degree of importance on growth and expansion and learning. Otherwise, we're just going to stay where we are. We're going to stagnate. We're just simply, as I said before, what got us here is not going to get us to that next level. So we have to put it on our agenda. We have to be so totally committed to growing, to expanding, and to moving on our limits. So this is a really important concept, because for a lot of people, if you want to grow, if you want to expand, it's not going to happen. It's like the person who gets to New Year's Eve that decides that they want to quit smoking, or they want to exercise more. They make an ad hoc decision on New Year's Eve that they want to change a behavior. So you've got to deeply care about this. It needs to be unconsciously cultivated at the deepest possible level, such that we actually value learning and growth. So that's the first element. So this really comes down to attitude first. What's our attitude to learning? What's our attitude to growing? How much are we willing to push beyond the comfort zone? Hey Steve, hey Angela, good to see you guys here. How are you guys? And we need to be willing to push ourselves so far out of our comfort zone that we're willing to get really, really uncomfortable. And because expansion and learning and growth, I can tell you most of the time, it's not necessarily comfortable. You are in this unfamiliar space, pushing beyond your fears, completely new experiences, discovering new parts of ourselves, we have to be totally willing to get vulnerable and to get curious about learning more about us. Otherwise, we're not even in the game. So we've got to prioritize that. And I think we need to start to recognize that in order to learn and in order to grow, we need to recognize that the patterns and the system that we grew up in traditionally at school, that's not the system that we need to subscribe to in order to get the most out of ourselves. I'll give you some examples. When we're at school, what do we get told? We get told, sit on your own, be quiet, don't talk to anyone, pay attention, listen to the teacher, right? It's just consuming content, which is a very, very one-dimensional, very, very low efficiency way of learning. These days, right, you've got to be asking questions. You've got to be doing activities. You've got to be exploring. You've got to be talking to your neighbor. You know, the thing at school is like, don't talk to your neighbor. Well, these days, if you're not talking to your neighbor, if you're not on Facebook, if you're not communicating and collaborating, you're out of business. You're behind. You're going to get left behind. So we need to have an attitude of, I've got to take this, I've got to absorb this, I've got to use it, I've got to utilize it, I've got to challenge it, I've got to test it. So we need to completely overwrite the habits and the traditions of old school education. And then we've got to radically shift that. And even concepts like university degrees. There's so many university degrees now that are just being superseded completely with technology. So we need to recognize that maybe some of the old school things that we've learned maybe aren't serving us, and we need to have a really open mind when it comes to learning new content, because if our cup's already full, we can't absorb anything. So we need to have this attitude of, you know what, I'm going to embrace vulnerability. I'm going to embrace maybe not knowing this. I'm going to embrace it's vulnerability. Vulnerability is the ultimate emotion or the ultimate frame that you want to consider around learning and growth, because you can only learn something when you're in a vulnerable state. If you think you already know it, if you think you've already got it sorted, how open and how receptive, how curious do you think you're going to be to absorb something and take something new on? So we need to completely throw out everything that we've known and assume that we know nothing, and be totally open to absorbing new ideas. And then once we've gone through that experience, we can then go back and say, we can then evaluate. But in that learning zone, we've got to be the emotions that we want is we've got to be okay with being vulnerable, okay with not knowing. We've got to be curious. We've got to be excited, because at school, for a lot of us, we were bored. So we carry a lot of these attributes of, well, you know, maybe I wasn't so good at maths, maybe I wasn't good at science. And because I was sitting in a maths and a science class, I now have associated learning with boredom. Or maybe I've associated me not being a good learner. So again, we also need to recognize, what are these emotional conditions that we're bringing with us when we approach our learning? What are our identity beliefs about ourselves and our ability to learn and ability to grow? Maybe some of us don't believe that we can even grow. Maybe some of us believe, well, look, this is just me, I can't change. Maybe people have the beliefs that they can't change. So again, we need to come back to limiting beliefs, sense of identity, to recognize that, well, we can grow, we can learn anything. You know, there's people in the world that have done some amazing things, and there's no difference in our physical hardware. They've just learned how to fire their brain in a particular way. They're literally thinking differently, they're behaving a certain way, and they've got a strategy. So we can learn the same strategy. So I think this is really empowering. So we've got to recognize and let go of the limitations that maybe I can't learn this, or I can't be good at something. Because if we can't let go of that, then we're never even going to get in the game. So this first element that's the most important is the mindset. What do we believe about ourselves? What do we believe about us and our ability to learn? This is powerful. And another key concept here is people love to learn but not apply. People love to just learn things, and I call it being in a state of perpetual potential. It's someone who's just learning for the sake of learning, to make their ego, to satisfy the need of the ego, to just feel like I know something. Are they applying it? Are they using it? Are they utilizing it? Are they actually, taking it and doing something with it? And if you're not taking something and using it, then it fits in the domain of shelf development, right? It's shelf development. It's literally just learning for the sake of learning, which is a complete waste of time. So when we learn something, we have got to take that bit of information. We've got to see, how can I apply it? Where is it relevant? Where does it fit in all the areas of my life? And I'm now going to put it on my agenda to utilize that, to actually express that, to become better at that, to figure out how does it fit in. So this is the thing is, anytime you go to a seminar, anytime you read a book, anytime you're watching a Facebook Live like right now, you should be so curious. You should have like a notebook out. You should be like frantically documenting every nugget of wisdom, every element that you can relate to. And then you want to go back to it afterwards and you want to highlight it and say, where is that relevant? How can I use that? How can I apply that? Where in my life does this fit? Because this fits somewhere. Because if you just close that book and put it on your shelf, bad luck. You've just missed that opportunity to apply it. Because to know and to not do is to not truly know, right? So people say that knowledge is power. Well, knowledge is not power if you don't use it, right? So knowledge is only powerful if you're applying it. So we need to become super clear with how we're going to apply that information, how we're going to implement it. So we need to actually approach our learning from the point of view of, well, we've got to have a plan. We just don't randomly go onto YouTube or just randomly look up podcasts and just see what, kind of like if you just go to the TV. If a lot of people just turn on the TV and they go, let's just randomly see what's on TV. It's not the most conscious way of cultivating your brain and giving you that experience that's going to expand you. What you want to do is you want to actually identify, well, what are the areas of my life that I want to improve? What is going to move the needle the most? And what areas do I want to double down on? What are the areas that I need to focus on that's going to give my life the greatest proportional increase in my quality of life? So for some people, it might be relationships. For some people, it might be career. For others, it might be health. We need to assess what is the most important area of my life right now. Where am I going? What's my vision? What do I want to create for my life? And I need to now design a learning plan, a learning curriculum that's going to give me the result that I'm looking for. So let's make this tangible. Say, for example, you're wanting to improve your career or you're wanting to improve your business. Right? You would look at that and you'd say, right, well, what are the key skills or key competencies that I need to learn in my career or my business that's going to move me ahead? What do I need to double down on? Is it communication? Is it sales? Is it marketing? Right? Is it emotional intelligence? What is that key skill, knowledge, experience, or attribute within me that I need to focus on that's going to propel me ahead of the rest? And you're going to notice that another way of describing this is calling them key success criteria. Right? So what are the key success criteria that you need to focus on that's going to give you the most amount of impact? And for some of you, you might have heard of the Pareto principle, which is the 80-20 rule. Now, the 80-20 rule says, well, what's the 20% of things that I need to focus on that are going to give me 80% of the gain? So we don't have to do everything. We just have to pick, well, what's the 20% that I want to focus on now and really do that really well. And it's going to move me ahead of the rest of the pack. So I want to give you some examples of the types of things that I believe help us elevate our consciousness, help us learn and grow and expand incredibly fast. And I've made some notes here and I'm going to put these up in the show notes afterwards. So if you guys want to download these, they'll be in a little bit of a worksheet. So the first one is consciousness. I would say the foundational principle for every human being, doesn't matter who you are, whether you want to become just a better friend, better human being, brother, sister, mother, doesn't matter, career, business owner, it doesn't matter, across the board. The number one skill that you need to work on is developing your conscious awareness, right? Or I think it was Aristotle that said, knowing thyself is the starting point of all wisdom. Well, this is a universal truth. The more that we have conscious awareness about ourselves, our conscious awareness is the number one skill we all need to be cultivating. Number one, and it's a skill. Conscious awareness is a skill. It's the ability to observe self. It's the ability to observe our thoughts, our emotions, our patterns, our beliefs, our ego, our fears. Because when we have that conscious awareness, it's like someone's just flicked all the lights on in a dark room, and we can go, oh, I can actually see what I'm doing. I can see what's going on. Thanks, Angela. So we've got to figure out, well, what is this ego? We've got to figure out, well, what are these limiting beliefs? What are the fears? What are all of my limitations? Because if we don't have conscious awareness, in the present moment of what is our experience unfolding, we have no power, we have no empowerment to change our life. So we need to learn about consciousness. We need to learn about ourself. We need to learn about things like the ego. We need to learn about things like your intuition, and whether you want to call it intuition, your gut, your spirit, your soul, your driving force, the flame inside of you, your authentic spark, whatever you want to call that, we need to recognize, well, how do I access that? How do I get guidance? How do I get that tap into that internal guidance inside myself? So that is a skill, and that can be cultivated. So this is the first major point, is we've got to develop our conscious awareness. We need to become very, very aware of our limitations. So these are the things like fears, limiting beliefs, negative habits. These are the patterns. These are negative emotions. These are when we get triggered by people in our environment. This is when we're judging other people. This is when we're indulging in like really negative criticism. We've got to recognize all of these things that are happening within us. Now, we also need to educate ourselves on and learn about how do we create a vision for ourselves? How do we define our life's purpose? How do we get clear on what we actually want to create for our life? Now, this in itself is a whole field of personal development in terms of what's your vision? What is your purpose? What goals do you want to create for your life? And then even goal setting. Goal setting is a skill. That's another key skill. So a lot of people are wanting to achieve goals, but they haven't actually learned the skill of goal setting. So it's the cart before the horse. It's the cart before the horse, because people are wanting to achieve the goals, but they haven't actually learned, well, goal setting is actually a skill. Goal achievement and goal attainment is a skill. And there's a lot of ingredients that go into that recipe that create the goal. So we need to understand, we need to learn the skills in the kitchen in order to cook the recipe. So it's the same with goal setting. So we also need to be really, really tuned in to how to be more productive, because productivity is the master skill of attaining our goals. So this now flows on to, well, we need to now educate ourselves on productivity. We need to look at, well, how do we stay focused? How do we stay connected? How do we avoid distractions? We really need to tune in and go, look, if I'm wanting to achieve that, well, what's going to move the needle the most? Have I got a plan? Have I got a strategy? Maybe have I got the skill, the knowledge, or the experience? What do I need to develop within me to get more productive so I can create more impact? So we need to see productivity as making impact. And again, it comes back to, well, what are my core success criteria, the key success criteria that are going to help me get there? So this is super important, and I'll share some of the examples in me and my business. So one of the key skills that I identified for me to elevate myself in my career was learning NLP. I identified that learning NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and hypnosis and timeline therapy, and all sorts of behavioral sciences and fields of psychology, I recognized that those fields were going to be the thing that could elevate me faster than any other fields of study to where I needed to go in terms of my career, my business, and my success. So I knew that was the foundational skill that I need to master and be masterful of in order to put myself ahead in the top 5% of people in the world in my industry. So I did that, and I was obsessed with that. So I acknowledged that, and I knew that was something I needed to create. So I had awareness of what I needed to do in order to be in the top 5% of people in the world. I created a plan. I spent close to probably $60,000 studying coaching and specifically NLP, not including all the other personal development I did. So, I had to use the equity in a house that was sold in order to bankroll that. So this is the kind of commitment that you've got to understand. You've got to decide that it's worth it. You've got to decide, if I want this so badly in my life, what am I willing to give up? What am I willing to sacrifice? And how important is this to me in my life? And that was the best investment I've ever made in my entire life, because it gave me the master skills that I needed. Thank you for all the love. It gave me the skills that I needed to be a masterful coach, for me to understand the code, to be able to help someone break through any limitation that they've got, to know all the traits of human behavior, to know all the processes that I need to guide someone through that. So that for me was the major element of awareness. And the reason why I'm sharing that with you is not to tell you how good I am, but it's to tell you what's required and the thinking behind how do we get good at what we need to do, but also what do we need to get good at. So we need to become masters of having awareness of, well, what's the skill that I need? What experience do I need? What knowledge do I need? And be very, very tactical about that approach. We need a plan. We need to have an approach to skill development that is surgical. We need to know, what are the books I'm going to read? What are the courses I've got to be studying? What are the podcasts I'm going to be listening to? Right? And again, self-reflection is another key component of this. We need to reflect on a daily basis about what are the areas of me in my life that I need to improve. Some people wait till once a year. They do it at the 30th of December, right? And then they go, well, what just happened there in that year? Maybe I've got to change a few things. Whereas if you do that process every single day, you can make rapid progress. You can accelerate your progress. You can achieve what might take decades. You can do it in months. So this is why conscious reflection and understanding self is so important, Because there's a lot of people that go to seminars, they read books, they do training courses, they do all this, they're doing all this stuff and they're learning, but what are they doing with it? It's just going on the shelf. So we need to take that, we need to take the knowledge, apply it to self, literally apply everything to ourselves to recognize, well, how does this apply to me? How do I elevate my mindset? How do I elevate my consciousness? How do I translate all of the learnings into my life so I can use it rather than just feel good to know that I've just literally satisfied the need of my ego to know something and then put it back on the shelf. So we need to now take action of implementing, of integrating that learning and having a reflective process daily on what did I learn today? What do I need to improve? What are the areas of my life that I want to master? What are the areas and what are the aspects of self that I need to move beyond? What are my limitations? What are my fears? What are my limiting beliefs? So we've got to take responsibility for confronting every single one of those limitations, or not, or you could just ignore it, or you could pretend like you don't have fears. You could pretend like everything's perfect. A lot of people do that. A lot of people drown their sorrows, and a lot of people numb the pain with alcohol and drugs, and just kind of checking out of their life. So what's also required on this journey is a journey of courage, a journey of self-inquiry, a journey of being willing to do whatever it takes to move beyond those limitations. That's what's required. So I trust that I've shared with you that so much of this is an attitude, really is an attitude, and it's less about strategy and it's more about attitude to a commitment to self, commitment to expansion, and really focusing on the fundamental elements of consciousness, which is self-reflection, of knowing thyself. As Aristotle said, know thyself. Knowing thyself is the starting point of all wisdom. So I might sound like a broken record, but developing our consciousness, this is where the game is won and lost. 100%. This is where the game is won and lost, because there's so many people that do the learning, they focus on the strategy, they might memorize a script, but if you haven't updated the internal software, your unconscious programming, your habits, your beliefs, your fears, if you haven't done the work, then all of that is meaningless. All of that is, you're not going to be able to implement, you're not going to be able to execute at the level of excellence that you want. So the internal work, like success it's always an inside job. Success is always an inside job. So we've got to make sure that we are masters of our mindset. We've got to understand all of our patterns and programs 100% all the way. And then we can create the life that we want. But until we're willing to do that, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And I see that firsthand, and I've experienced that with my own life. I've felt like I've had a strategy and I've been following the strategy, but it's not working. Well, why it wasn't working was because I didn't believe it was going to work. My attitude wasn't right. I wasn't connected. I wasn't, insert mindset reason why the strategy wasn't getting executed. So as Tony Robbins said, I think Jim Rohn said it originally, he said that 80% of our success comes down to our psychology. Like, that's huge. If you actually understand the significance and the magnitude of that, then what that means is 80% of your focus, your time, your energy, your attention should be towards you. It should be towards understanding you and everything that's going on within you, because that's the key to life. That's the key to success. Everything you experience in your external world is being created through internally, your thoughts, your habits, your emotions, your thinking, your belief system. It's all being created through internally inside of you. That's the truth. That's the reality of the world we live in. If you don't like your external reality, there's only one option to change that, and that's to change your internal reality. That's the universal truth, and that's the way it works. And unfortunately, the reason why there's so much dysfunction in people's lives is because people aren't aware of that. They're either not aware of it or they don't know how to change it. So what I'm wanting to give you is I'm wanting to give you the things to focus on, because when you focus on these things, these are the things to double down on that are going to make the biggest difference. These are going to move the dial the most, completely move the needle the most. So you want to also focus on your emotional intelligence. This is another key characteristic. You've got to focus on emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence? Well, I recommend you all go out and study emotional intelligence, because when you study and become aware of emotional intelligence, you'll recognize it's actually more important than IQ, than intelligence quotient, right? Forbes magazine have done studies and they've shown that EQ is a greater predictor of job success and success in life than IQ. So powerful to know that, right? So for those of you wanting a starting point, I recommend checking out Daniel Goleman. Now, he's one of the world leaders on emotional intelligence. Check him out. Emotional Intelligence 2.0 was the book I definitely recommend you all checking out. Powerful read. So again, self-regulation, self-awareness. Again, understanding what's going on inside our mind, what's going inside our emotional world. The other aspects of emotional intelligence are motivation. right? A propensity to be able to pursue a goal that goes beyond money and self-gratification, as well as we also need to have empathy and social skills. So these are the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence. So again, if we don't know what emotional intelligence is, if we don't know what our emotional intelligence is, if we don't know what the 5 pillars of emotional intelligence are, we're kind of helpless in terms of, well, how do I even change my emotional world? How do I even understand how I'm operating? How do I create success? So it's literally like someone who's wanting to cook like a world-class recipe, but they don't know what the ingredients are in the recipe, let alone how to cook it. So we've got to get super curious to unlock all of those factors within us. Those 5 pillars of emotional intelligence are critical. Again, as I said, success is an inside game. It's an inside job. So if we're looking at our external reality and it's not matching up and it's not what we want, we've only got one person to look at, and that's ourselves. But that's empowering. That's beautifully empowering. Hey, Lindsay, good to see you here. How you doing? So I want to give you guys some really powerful and practical tools here, so we can, because I'm always wanting to make this really tangible. So what I want to give you is some really great tools that I believe are really, really powerful in terms of accelerating our learning. So as I said, we've got to upgrade our consciousness. We need to really get curious about how we're doing conscious awareness. How are we actually doing this thing that we call consciousness? And recognize that there are so many illusions, there are so many limitations that we need to become aware of in order to move beyond them. Things like the ego, things like limiting beliefs, things like fears, negative emotions, like negative habits, all these things. We need to become super aware of them. We also need to become aware of what's our purpose in life. What are we actually looking to achieve? What are our goals in life? What's our emotional intelligence? Right? We need to become aware of how do we become more productive. What are the skills, knowledge, and experience that we need to acquire to put us in that top 5% of people in our field? Now, once we've done that, we now need to create an agenda. We need to create a personal development plan. We need to create a structure about, well, how the hell am I going to learn all this? How am I even going to do all this? So we need to create a reading list. We need to create a list of podcasts. We need to create playlists on YouTube. And I'm going to give you some practical advice here on how to settle that up. So what I recommend you do is, I recommend that you actually brainstorm all the major categories, the key success criteria of what you're looking to create in terms of the skills, the ability, the knowledge, the competencies that you're wanting to acquire. Now, this could be everything from emotional intelligence to learning NLP to learning about how to be better at relationships, all the way through to learning masculine, feminine energy, learning about time management, productivity, all these sorts of things, right? We need to work out, well, out of all those options of the menu of what I could, you go to a bookstore, there's like thousands of books you could learn, right? The purpose in life is not to read everything. The purpose in life is not to learn everything. There's only so many hours in the day. You can only learn what is the most important, the most applicable, and the most relevant to you at this moment in time. So you want to get very, very tactical with how you're spending every single minute of your learning. Everything that you learn wants to be completely designed, completely tactically laid out. So I'm learning this for this reason. When you go and buy your next book, you got to ask, well, for what purpose am I reading this book? Is it to just pass the time, or is it to expand and elevate my life? So you then got to go, rightio, well, if I could read any book, what's the area of my life I want to improve the most right now? That would make sense, right? Now, yes, I'm also a fan of reading books for entertainment and for experiencing joy and peace and that sort of stuff. However, here are the consequences. There is always a sacrifice in life. If you decide to read a book, or if you decide to watch just a show on Netflix to kind of relax, there is a consequence. If you could have spent that time doing something else, you could have spent time learning, growing, expanding, connecting, doing something that's maybe more in alignment with you. Now, again, this is a whole nother Facebook Live, is knowing what's in alignment with you. Now, for me, I'm very, very clear on my core values. Growth is basically my third core value in the context of life. I've basically got connection and love, I've got vitality, and I've got growth as my top 3. So I know that growth is one of my highest priorities in life, and I will prioritize that deliberately, consciously. I block out time in my calendar every single week, right? I have 1 hour a day minimum of reading. And then on top of that, I now have podcast lists. I have YouTube playlist videos that I get through. So I definitely recommend creating a YouTube playlist. You know, when you go on YouTube and you see some really cool videos, well, what you want to do is don't necessarily watch them all then and there, because you'll get distracted. Add them to a playlist, create a playlist, and then come back and then schedule time in your calendar to go back and say, right, I need to learn about this. Schedule it, create a list, right? You don't just learn ad hoc. You don't just watch it because it was the next video. You say, well, I'm going to watch it when it's applicable. I'm going to watch it when I need to learn it. Maybe I don't need to learn that now. Maybe I need to learn that in 2 or 3 years' time. Maybe it's not relevant yet. So we've got to become very, very strategic, very tactical, very deliberate with every minute of our day, because time is our most valuable resource.